Hey everyone, Charles Davis here, host of Sports Stars of Tomorrow. And what a special time this is for me to talk with a man that I got to know for the first time when I tried out for a team that he was a star of, the Dallas Cowboys. And they rightly cut me while he continued on as a all-pro Pro Bowl corner with Dallas, with the New York Giants. Obviously a proud graduate of Grambling, where he was an All-American there as well. Everson Walls, welcome to Sports Stars of Tomorrow, and really a special format for us because we're talking outside of just the normal, hey, look where he came from, here's where he is, here's where he's going.
Right.
A different time and a place in our country due to some events that for a lot of people, and I hear the word Everson, unprecedented all the time. And I
Yeah.
keep shaking my head like you don't know unprecedented
Right.
because these are not unprecedented times. So if you don't mind, if I could start with you, when you start to think about the United States, race relations, issues with police, where again, we're not talking the police, we're talking about certain incidents with police,
Of course.
with your upbringing and with your time of dealing with people, maybe you could kind of share why I say these days, times, and days are not unprecedented.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned it that way, Charles, because when you start thinking about, me, I'm 60 years old, and of course grew up in the 60s. When I say grew up, I was a toddler, watching everything that was going on in regards to the Black Muslims with Malcolm X and the peaceful movement or nonviolent movement with Martin Luther King. All of that was going on all at once, including the Vietnam War that we had to deal with as well. So you talk about unprecedented. I'm glad you said that, Charles. Those moments that I just spoke of, those are moments that I'm still dealing with as a grown up. Uh, and I could imagine, I was just talking to my wife just before I came on here about how these young people here, because they're fighting the fight, they're seeing some things that they never thought they'd see. They came up with a luxury of a Barack Obama as their president. The majority of their political awareness was listening to someone with the empathetic nature of Barack Obama. And so now, with this change in leadership, this is something that is a shock to them. Uh, and that's where I was in the 60s. Never had that kumbaya president, so to speak. Never had that forward thinking president. Everything that you see from this present administration is what was the norm back in the 60s. Worse probably than what you see now, what's caught on video and some that are not caught on video. These are things that has affected my entire outlook on life. And so here I am. It took a while for me to uh, get over that. And unfortunately, uh, I adjusted to it. And when I say unfortunately, uh, I think that's the way America is. We adjust to it and look at that racism. We look at that discrimination as a new norm. And as a society, people in my generation have always tried to fight it. And as much as we try and fight it, we have always had public opinion against us. Now, when you talk about what the advantages are for this generation, is inclusion. That's something we did not have back in the 60s and 70s. If you were black, you thought one way. If you were white, you pretty much thought one way. And those whites that were empathetic to what we were doing and tried their best to join our movements, the numbers were extremely small. And even their mindset was very narrow in what African Americans needed at this time. So when you let it fester and fester and fester, whether it's gun rights, whether it's prejudice, whether it's the Rodney King beating, that slow progress is finally making some headway. But the pain and the death and the losses that came with that were numerous. as we try and make it to this point. So there are a lot of George Floyds out there. Unfortunately, there are a lot of George Floyds out there. And I'm not trying to straddle any fences, but I know that black folks are not the only ones that got beat by cops, uh, because there is no understanding or dialogue, not just about black folks getting beat, but people with mental illnesses, black and white, who have not been able to process what's going on with them. And the cops are not equipped or trained or just could really care less about what their issues are. So it's not just one thing that is being realized here. You know, it's a plethora of events and policies that are antiquated. And as you see this new generation, this young generation trying to remedy that, then you're going to have some growing pains. You're going to have some partnerships that you would never thought would be made. And it's a matter of, I've always thought this, policy can't make people like you, okay? That's not what policy is for. You can feel any way about a particular person or a particular group, but the main thing is that you respect their rights as a group or as a person. You don't have to like them. I get it. I mean, I'm sure I could come up with a reason of some guys I don't like. You see a guy riding around a pickup truck, he might have a certain way. I might immediately have a certain thought about that particular person, but I'm not going to try and resist against that person having his own rights. You see, I'm not going to let that initial mindset make me discriminate against him. And that's something that needs to be understood.
That point you just brought up there, the initial mindset versus what really needs to happen with all of us, because we do make there's a visceral reaction to everyone you encounter, to every situation you encounter. I'm 55, so not too far behind you on the coming up scale. Yes. My father was a high school teacher and coach in Tennessee. Graduated from a historically black college and university in West Virginia, Bluefield State.
Bluefield State.
Big Blues. All right? And so he left, went to teach in Elizabethton, Tennessee. That was 1962. Coach, taught, the whole deal. People we're still close to. His guys used to babysit for me, right? I'm still close to some of them. My point being, Everson, you talked about how we came along this line and how we put laws into place. Well, Brown versus the Board of Education, which was to integrate schools with all deliberate speed, was 1954.
Wow.
My father was teaching in a segregated school system in Elizabethton, Tennessee in 1964, 65, 66. And in 67, 68, now they wanted to, okay, all deliberate speed, 54 to 67, now it's happening.
Right.
So I had a conversation with him, and I'll try and be brief on this. And you remember the Titans when Coach Booth, when he showed up?
Of course.
And, you know, for the assistant's position. People forgot initially in the movie he was there for an assistant's position, and then they were telling him there was no position. And I remember saying something to my dad, and I'd never heard that story. My dad said, well, when that happened in 67, that was the same thing happened to me. Went over and saw the head coach, and he said, Coach Davis, you've done a great job over there, but we don't have a spot for you. We just don't. My dad took him at his word. 2 days later, they hired a white man to take an assistant's job. So I had joked with my dad that if I'd stayed in Elizabeth, then I would have played for such and such a coach. He said, no, you wouldn't have. And that's when I learned the story. The reason I bring that up, Everson, is I grew up at a time where we moved to New York because of that. So there was a little bit of a bubble where I grew up where it's not overt racism. It's not overt laws that are keeping you down. My dad was one of the few black teachers in the area. You get the whole point. And I don't remember incidents, but there were things that happened along the way that you look back, oh, that's what that was. But it wasn't overt. You mentioned being comfortable wasn't the right word. Accepting's not the right word. But you fight. And after a while, you're like, how do I maneuver around and through all of this? And then it bubbles up like now.
That's right.
Can you talk about that a little bit more, Everson? Because to me, that's a big part of this. These youngsters who are out leading the charge now, as you said, they may not have known Dr. King, Malcolm X, Vietnam War, all the things we're talking about, because these laws are actually on the books. Now they're just saying, shouldn't we be enforcing them properly? Before, we didn't even have the laws on the books.
And that's how we got the laws on the books, was because of leaders like Malcolm X, because of leaders like Martin Luther King and his entire, Jesse Jackson as well. These are people that, while we're fighting for our own rights, we're also fighting for progress in America, in the workforce. I remember Jesse Jackson coming along in the 80s when NBA basketball was really taking off after the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson thing. And, Jesse Jackson was always that guy that was trying to make things happen. And we always, as we've gotten older, we were very cynical about Jesse and people like that. But let's not forget, Jesse was one of the few guys that kept understanding that corporate America needed to adhere to what Black folks were thinking and doing, because you're taking our money, but we have nobody in the management position. Jesse was one of the first guys to push for that. If you recall, in the NBA, he pushed for it, was successful when he did with Pepsi, I believe it was. I believe it was Pepsi. But then he came along into the sports venue and he's tried to touch on Nike. And oh man, all the brothers, all the Black athletes, they pushed back, because it wasn't about the greater good. It was about, I want to keep getting my Nike contract. Right. I want to keep getting that free gear. Instead of them realizing the power that they had as individuals at that particular time in 1980, you look at that situation, how failed it was, because no one backed Jesse Jackson in that regard because of their selfishness. You take that all the way up to where we are right now in the NFL, okay? Once you stall progress, to pick it back up again, it's a slow turn. So now, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Can I take you now, because you mentioned that? Okay, during that time frame, even though this was presented, I got to make sure I take care of me, because there's a natural suspicion. All right, you fought hard just to get that little bit from Nike.
That's right.
I'm a little worried about someone taking that from me, even someone who looks like me.
That's right.
What are the intentions? I've not seen this before. Can you parallel that now to what you thought? Was it 2 nights ago, 3 nights ago, when the video came from the NFL players that have promoted, I think, a ton of change I shouldn't let it change. It promoted a shifting relationship now with the commissioner of the NFL, where these players came together and did that because that power collectively, as opposed to not utilizing it before.
And we can say these words and everyone's going to listen to this word and say, oh, this is overblown. But let's just be real. Corporate America already has a type of plantation mentality. It's just the way it is. The NFL is even bigger. That model that the NFL has, that is an uber standard for corporate America. Let's just be real. All the owners owned corporations before that. They had a certain mindset about their employees. And now that you've got football, the way that they try to have this wild, wild west type of platform for the owners themselves, leaving players black and white with very little protection until they have the mindset to fight for that. And as you fought for that, you had some people who did not understand what that struggle was all about, black and white. So now here we are with these young men who are more aware, and as they say, more woke. These kids are woke these days because of the things that we went through. I was a union rep for the Dallas Cowboys with Tex Schramm being the GM there, who's one of the more powerful men in football at the time. They came up with the scab games in 1987. That was right there at Valley Ranch where we were picketing. Well, when it came down to it, we had almost all of our superstars crossed over in '87. We were one of the worst strike teams in 1987, and I was the union rep, so that I took that very personally. There were times I was out there picketing by myself because nobody else wanted to get involved, and they didn't want to be uh, tagged with that moniker. And so you have to have certain people that's going to fight the fight. You have to have certain people whose narratives are not going to change. They're going to be consistent no matter what decade it is. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali. Those ones were usually the linchpin for our progress. These are the guys that we hung our hats on. Because
Bill Russell.
Thank you, Bill Russell. They never wavered, and we find that they were always correct. You look at Kaepernick. You see, these young men that made that video, they were influenced by Kaepernick. Kaepernick was influenced by others in the past. So it's so good to see that as that progress is coming along, you've got more superstars who are willing to risk their reputations and sometimes their careers to make a point to stand with others, to think of others more than you think of yourself. That's the way I was brought up. My father, my parents, my community, all Black community in Hamilton Park, we were like any other Black community. The church was our strength. That was our political post, so to speak. And everything that we did was all about our parents sacrificing for us, okay, as the younger generation comes. I told my wife when I saw that video of the young men, I said, those are the soldiers I needed with me back in 1987. Because we didn't have that.
Do you think Everson back in 1987, and this isn't absolving, this isn't anything, but the difference in 87 versus where we are now, these young men realize they're not going to lose their job over this.
Yeah.
And still a courageous step. I'm not saying this is easy.
That's still courageous.
Stretch. But they realize, hold on a second, we are the show. In 87, did you still have a number of guys worried, Everson, that when they stepped out there, that it wouldn't be there for them later on if they didn't stay with it?
There's no doubt that was the fear. And that fear was real. Okay, what happened to Kaepernick, that was the norm back in the 80s. And I was surprised to see that still happening to a man who was as accomplished as Kaepernick was. And so my whole thought process is, if we don't do it now, when are we gonna do it? You're talking about, you're looking out for yourself and your family. Well, what about the next generation and their family? How can they look at where they are now as far as their relationship with the league and the team owners, as far as the strict that they have as a players association? If they come up 10 years later, 20 years later, and they still have the same weak position, no position of strength, no roots in the ground, no foundation, if you still have that same position, that's our fault. That's the guys in the 80s. That's our fault. And I still believe that. I am still extremely ashamed of how I failed the union in regards to trying to keep the superstars from crossing the line. I did my best to try and make them understand that we are not going to benefit from this. It's for the players coming up that's going to benefit for that. And I get it. Everybody doesn't have that mindset. I went to Grambling, so we were always about each other. That's all we had was each other. Of course, we were fighting amongst the ranks, but still, when it all came down to it, we knew that that's all we had with each other. HBCUs trying to hang in there against the big schools and things of that nature. That mentality was always there with me. My mom finally made me realize. She took me to Albuquerque in 1982, along with my girlfriend, my future wife, Sherelle. I sat there and I watched grown men sound like children. I mean, to me, at that time, I was 22 years old. So my thing is, man, I'm going to go here and I'm going to see what solidarity is all about, and everybody's going to be on the same page. We're going to all be together. And what I witnessed was a bunch of separation. I saw superstars getting up, wondering. Franco Harris, I'll never forget it. A hero of mine. I hated him because he played with the Steelers,
Steelers.
and he killed my Cowboys all the time. But I still looked at him as someone that I admired. And when I saw him stand up and he said, "I'm not in favor of this plan, or I have questions about this plan because the Rooneys have been good to me." And those words, I could be very cynical. I was cynical at the time, and I get it as I've grown and matured. But those words angered me, and it wasn't just because he said them. It was because that was the mood in the room. And when you look back on that and you see how long hesitation halts the progress, how that was 1982, and you finally have an owner who came out with a statement. The statement, very cool statement, very appropriate. But when you look at your fellow owners right now are contributing to an administration that is showing its true colors. So you have a clear conflict of interest between owners and players. It is extremely clear right now. I don't think I've heard one owner come out yet and denounce what's going on or just offering support for the peaceful protesters. I don't think one owner has come out yet. And you've got players, though, that are doing that. So you've got players leading the way when I think the owners are the one that should be setting the standard. And they're not setting the standard, not because they have some type of way of thinking, the way they were brought up. They're not making a stand or making a statement because it's a financial decision on their part. And so financial is really over their players, what their players call their civic duty.
What would you say now, Everson, with the youngsters? Like, this show, Sports Stars of Tomorrow, we're obviously talking about the youth of America.
Yeah.
Before they get up to that level that you attained of making it to the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, all the top sports that our young ladies, our women can play.
Yeah.
And these top levels, the WNBA, playing overseas, Major League Soccer, you name it, right? They can do it. And that opportunity's out there for them now. But at this high school age, coaches have a heavy influence.
Yes, they do.
I'm extremely close to my high school coaches. I have a feeling you have had a very
my high school coach saved my life. My high school coach, he's a white guy. He saved my life by allowing me to play football. That's true.
I'm the same way. That part does not matter. That they cared about us. And they showed it by how they did it day in and day out. And I love those men for those people for doing that. But now on this show, for these kids who are woke, and now they have social media, they have platforms, they have voices that they never had before. We didn't have any of that voice. We didn't speak.
We didn't have the videos. We didn't have the platform for our words to get out. That's correct.
What would your guidance be for them right now as they're observing where we are in history? Because this is a heck of a time in history, and they're living it, not just seeing something that was shown them in school now. They're living it.
They're living it. Isn't that crazy? They're living it. That is really kind of scary for the future of our kids' well-being mentally, because that, you can have kids that are dealing with PTSD after these moments. They've never seen something like that. And it's not just, like I said, it's not just as George Floyd. There are many things that happened that weren't even caught on camera.
Right.
And then you've got some of their friends who are going off on a totally different direction in order to revolt, okay? To where you would go like, look, no, that is not me. I'm going there. So my advice to young people, young men and women, the young women are just amazing how dedicated and passionate they are. And they're just deliberate in every step that they make. It's calculating. I love that about our young ladies. But when we're talking to all of them, understand that your platform is bigger, no doubt about it. So therefore, your responsibility is greater to do it the right way. We make jokes sometimes in our different generations. They call us boomers, I think. That's like, hey, boomers, y'all didn't do it right. Here we go. We got it together. Well, if you want to believe that, that's great. Take that power, but take it to a concerted direction. You take it somewhere to where you know that it's something that can't be denied. Uh, there can be anger. Uh, there can be outrage. It's no doubt about it. Outrage has always caused me to do things that were really outside myself in a good way. Outrage caused me to donate a kidney. Okay, outrage taught me to stop being an idiot and start looking forward to bettering yourself and go to college. I was outraged with myself and how I did things. If you want to look at influences in your generation, you don't have to look too far. Malcolm Jenkins, who was the player rep for the NFL Players Association in Philadelphia. The impassioned video that he made after the Drew Brees video.
And now he's back in New Orleans.
Now he's back in New Orleans, and where his influence is going to be great for that organization and that city. Malcolm Brogdon, a guy that they call him Senator, which is what I called you too, because you look like a senator too. He got that look of even-keeled, even-temperedness that is needed in times like this. He has a direction on where he wants to go in regards to helping people. He's been over to Africa, helping the people over there get water in their villages. He has influenced others to come over and not just help him. They have donated money to his cause because that cause is well thought out. It's well needed. It can't be argued against. And if you try and argue against it, you will be unsuccessful. So you've got to come up with a platform that allows you. LeBron James, you look at someone who is the perfect mix between Michael Jordan, who's about the capitalism, and I'm not trying to,
Mike
search him in any way, but we know him for being a billionaire. But we know
accumulated wealth gave us a goal, a target.
There you go.
There you go. I think I understand.
So here you go. But LeBron was also influenced by the Malcolms and the Martins, those that could articulate just what they want from anyone that comes into their realm. You see, don't come to me with any foolishness or ignorance or prejudice or discrimination. I'm all about going forward with positivity for everyone. So what he did was chose the Bill Russells, and he chose that side of it to open up a school and to always speak out on issues that he knows his voice is going to hold a lot of weight towards.
You mean he's not just going to shut up and dribble?
He's not just going to shut up and dribble, but he also has bank. So you got bank, and then you have social consciousness. So you have influences there within your own generation that you can emulate and understand that this is how you use your power now. You don't have to go around breaking windows if you don't want to. You can still be angry. You can still be outraged, but still love the cause and promote the cause that's a good cause.
Thank you for bringing that up, because often what I'm hearing, Everson, is people in and outside of the struggle, for lack of a better term, those who don't want to see progress or believe it has to be done a certain way, the looters, the rioters, give them reason to exit.
Right.
I'm going to articulate for myself, you take it from there.
Yes, sir.
What I want people to understand is no one who's trying to get this done the right way thinks that rioters and looters are helping anyone's cause, are being condoned by anyone trying to get this done. Yet that's where people will end up bringing the argument back to, and that's never been what this has been about or what it should be about, and where we're going is about.
That's right. And see, what I saw was initially you saw the looters. What you saw was a lot of bad influences coming in that was noticed by the media. And that's another thing that is such a shift in a paradigm, is how the media covers civic unrest. Because now the media is smarter. The media is, I think, even fairer at this point Fox News aside, I think what you see out there are people realizing that as this protest has gone on peacefully, the looters, they'll be getting smaller and smaller. Now, what I was thinking early on, and I'm not all the way in on what's going on with everything that every riot or every unrest or every protest. My thing was I wanted Black Lives Matter to come out and say, look, if you ain't with us, then get the hell out. That's what I want them to say. And I'm sure they have said that. I just hadn't heard it. I'm sure they have. But just
trying to weed
people,
out all of that so that
yes,
the protest and the message is
yes.
out there and presented in a way that we all want it to be presented, not
And
those.
as it has progressed, you see much more of that. I think I saw Philadelphia. Was that Philadelphia? All of those people. See, that's the kind of amazing stuff I'm talking about. All peaceful, okay? Maybe have a little bit here and there, but when you have that many people together and you see that kind of peaceful protest, that gave me, it really kind of gave me chills because the number was massive and all of the same mindset. And once again, everyone in those masses of people, no, everyone there didn't love each other. Okay, everyone there didn't love each other, but they loved the cause. You see, and the reason that we're here, one of the reasons is because we never want to talk about it. We're kind of like parents who just don't want to know that their kids are bad. I'm kind of like that sometimes. I don't feel like talking to my son about something.
Hey,
I don't feel like being the hard guy today. But as a nation, we have been trying to talk honestly about race and about discrimination in all forms. But when the tragedy happens, we want to really spew, and then those that have mitigated these problems they don't. This is not the time. Whether it's shootings or whether it's prejudice, it's never the time. And it's just time for America to just buck up, man. Man up. I know it's a tough conversation. We know America's built on racism. We know some of the politicians themselves, their families own slaves. We know this. And yet they're voting on things that have something to do with anti-discrimination. Anti-lynching bill and anti-lynching bill was just introduced, and I think it finally passed. The fact that we have to still have that as politicians, as so-called leaders, you've got to understand that is extremely flawed. And anything that happens because of that, you can't cry foul now that it's affecting you. You see what I'm saying? Because we've been affected for, well, of course, centuries, but even in regards to just this topic of police brutality, decades and decades this has been going on because nobody wants to talk about it. And those that commit these offenses, they're glad that no one talks about it because they can continue with their same discrimination practices.
Why does the phrase Black Lives Matter drive some people absolutely insane? Because and follow me here. Often the retaliation is all lives matter.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Mhm.
Always have accepted that. I thought that was a given, a baseline.
That is a given.
All lives do matter. We know that.
Yes.
But the phrase Black Lives Matter came out because it certainly seemed like those did not.
Right.
But when you try to have that conversation, there's a beyond defensiveness.
Yes.
The invective that comes back at you, the people trench in and dig in, and all lives should matter. Well, we've known that forever, but ours we have not felt have.
Never has. It never has. And you know what's funny about that is
How do we get that message across, Everson, without it turning into what I'm seeing and hearing so often?
well, I think when you see people that are afraid of Black Lives Matter, then it threatens their white privilege. That I think that's one of the problems. Now that comes from white people. But then when you look at Black people that may not be ready to just jump on board in that regard, because as a people, we have been beaten down so much in society that culturally we don't necessarily want to stand out. Culturally, we don't feel like we should have to yell Blackness for that Blackness to be respected. That's a great way to think of it, but that's not the way it has played out. I looked at, they got all kinds of stuff on Facebook and Twitter all these times, and what you see is it was a simple. I'm a math guy, so this was a simple equation. When you're talking about all is all encompassing. Okay, so all is that means it is all has the same value in all, no matter what elements you put in there. All of them have the same value. But when you devalue one, then all does not exist anymore because one of them has been devalued and taken out of the equation. That would be the treatment of African Americans. So it needs to be shined upon. If you say Black Lives Matter, that doesn't mean the others don't matter. All that means is we're neglecting this issue here. And that's the problem that we've been dealing with. We keep being afraid to call out the fact that this country was born on this particular component really not mattering. It matters when it comes to progress for your country, but not progress for that particular component. So this component does not seem to matter to the powers that be. So when you say all lives matter, that's a given because all lives aren't singled out. But this particular component of Black people are being singled out. And once again, we try to talk about that. Even Black folks don't want to talk about it, okay? Because they're not equipped necessarily because of culturally, we have been trying our best to get away from being separated. We always just wanted to be included, and we're not. So having that discussion of including us, that won't take away from your white privilege. Not at all. If you're qualified doing what the heck you're doing, if you're a qualified person, you shouldn't worry about Black people. If you're not, then yes, I can see why you're worried about it. And those are the problems we have with Black Lives Matter.
As we get close to finishing here, think about today for me, where we are right now as you and I are having this conversation. What's going on in our country and in our world, from everything you've seen in your life and the things that you've accomplished, because we've talked about ball. We've talked about a heck of a lot more than ball. And this is where I think for a lot of people, when I try and say you can't, they always say, just talk about sports. Well, when you just talk about sports, you're still talking about people.
You're still talking about
people bring these things to sports. There's no getting around it. Okay. The Olympics.
That is the most foolish approach that you can ever come up with. That is such a foolish approach.
Right. And the Olympics have always been a political mechanism. I used to work for the committee, so I understand. All I'm saying is you've seen all these things happen. You continue to see them. You also see the future. As we sit here right now, from what you're seeing in our country, where's your optimism?
Oh, my optimism is with these young people. My optimism is the knowledge that they have now. There were so many times, Charles, when we were growing up, all these movies are coming out. Just an example, Hidden Numbers, right? Hidden Numbers, isn't that the name of it? Why we never realized how smart these young ladies were back in the day. They were human computers.
They were human. They
were human computers by hand. There was no typing. They were human computers by hand. And this was our culture, okay? So as you look at your history books that were given to our young Black children, there was no mention of any of that in any of our history books. Now, once again, as a people, we should have been more educated on what we have done in society. But when everything around you is about negativity towards you as a person, then it's I don't want to give it an excuse, but your mindset is elsewhere not about the history of math.
Right.
Your mindset is about trying to get a job. Okay, your mindset is about trying to get away from discrimination. Your mindset is trying to get out of a horrible housing situation. So you're not even you're distracted by everyday problems, and not just everyday problems. These are everyday problems, especially to poor and Black people. So my optimism comes from the fact that there is knowledge now from these young people. Uh, you have knowledge from both sides. Okay, you have knowledge from whites that understand that yes, they are privileged, uh, and you don't want anybody to be ashamed of anything. Be proud of whatever you. I don't give a damn what color you are. I don't care what it is. But use what you have to make things better for others. And I say this to any of the young people out there. Um, you're going to have a lot of power placed in your laps in the near future. And when I say near future, I mean the next 10, 20 years. For the next 10, 20 years, there's going to be a change in the paradigm of everything that we have known, that we will know since we were born. And so now is the time to go forward with great responsibility. Don't take advantage of what's going to be laid in your lap right now, because it's something that's extremely new. It's like you're giving, there's like a ball of power right now in your hands. What do you do with that power? How do you direct that power? And you literally have that right now. So those that want to be leaders, understand that as you go into being a leader, that responsibility is going to weigh heavily upon you. Take that with pride. It's going to be heavy for you, but take it with pride, knowing that you're going to be affecting change for the immediate future. Not, oh, it's going to take time. Oh, let's wait another 50 years, another 60 years. No, I mean, you have a chance to make a change immediately, and that is something that I don't think Blacks have ever had the luxury of even thinking about.
Everson, I was just thinking as you were talking there, Sam Cooke gave us that beautiful song, "A Change Is Gonna Come."
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure he thought 2020.
He was not. He was not.
That's what you're talking about. This is the time. This is what Martin Luther King Jr. called the zeitgeist, when it all comes together at that moment in time, and there it is. There's the opportunity. And I think we all have it as a nation. We have it as a world. We're seeing it out there. George Floyd's death may have been the spark, unfortunately, but it's not just his. There's so many others. You know, I'm living in Florida. Trayvon Martin comes to mind immediately. Right. These sorts of things have been bubbling up and happening. Breonna Taylor. Don't think we've forgotten our beautiful women out there.
So many.
This is they're all over the place. But it's us being better as a world for in so many ways. So when you talk with these youngsters, with our sports stars of tomorrow grouping, our family, I hope they're hearing what you're telling them and the education that you just laid down. And there's so much more out there for all of them. But I can't thank you enough, because I've always looked up to you. I mean, you mentored me and led the way with me and so many others, and how you've lived, how you presented, all those things. Black College Football Hall of Famer. I think he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
We're still working on it.
You are already Human Being Hall of Fame.
I appreciate that, Joe.
Okay, and that has no color, no limit, no bounds, no whatever, because you're speaking about people. Even though, yes, we as Black people might be the focal point of this time in history, but we're talking about people overall. There are a lot of people who want to get in on this fight. And
can I say one more thing?
Yes, sir.
One thing that has happened with the Black movement in the past is that we have hung our hats on just one leader. And when that leader goes by the wayside, then, you know, we're rudderless. I would say that at this day and time, we have many capable leaders out there, and we always have. We have many capable leaders out there, and just understand that if you have a soldier that has fallen, and this is in life as well, then it's your responsibility to pick it up and keep on going. It's just not, and I don't mean going towards another direction. I mean continuing in that path of that person that you idolize. But once again, that's whether it's in life with a friend or a family member, or whether it's some leader that you're looking to take you out of your particular situation. You've got many leaders out there. You would be surprised. George Floyd, nobody ever heard of him. All of those that we just named out that have been killed by policemen,
So many others.
names that we've never heard of. Imperfect human beings.
As we all,
Yet their names are going to be a part of change. So understand that as you go forward with that. No matter who is your inspiration, if that person calls on you to do something, then be ready to do it. Take that responsibility and pick up the mantle. Let's keep it going.
yeah. And what I'm seeing out there as I close, when I'm seeing people out there asking for that change, seeking that change, you mentioned it earlier, yes, there were people of other colors who wanted to help before. The numbers were smaller. When you look out now,
I can't tell if it's a black protest or not, which is cool as hell.
America is speaking now.
That's right.
Which is wonderful to see. And I thank everyone who's involved in it. But I thank you especially for your time and for your mind and for your heart.
Thanks, Charles, man. It's good to see you as always, brother. Always represent well. I love it.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.